Now it's my pleasure to introduce the very talented Steve Vogel, who is not only a book author, but a longtime reporter with the Washington Post. If you love history and politics, and you have an appreciation for the exquisite use of language, then Mr. Vogel is the writer for you. His book, The Pentagon, published in 2007, chronicled the rapid and fascinating creation of the landmark Pentagon building during World War II and the equally significant reconstruction of that building after 9/11. The book itself is a landmark work, and it confirmed Mr. Vogel's place as a social historian, a military expert, a policy expert, and a storyteller. His new book, Through the Perilous Fight, is a gripping account of 6 weeks in 1814. It has heroes, villains, leaders, and cowards, and it retells in vivid detail both the burning of our young capital at the hands of the British and the spectacular but improbable turn of events in the battle for Baltimore that would change the course of the war and the path of our young nation. As a journalist, Steve Vogel has written extensively about military history, the treatment of veterans, the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the attacks on September 11th, among other subjects. He is a graduate of the College of William and Mary and earned a master's degree in international public policy from the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. Ladies and gentlemen, the talented Steve Vogel.
Thank you very much. Really a great honor to be here. When I think about it, the Library of Congress, which you may or may not know, was actually burned down as part of the story I tell. It's kind of ironic to be here today to talk about it, particularly considering the admiral who was more or less behind the attack on Washington that led to the burning of the White House and the Capitol, the Library of Congress, George Coburn. Today, his papers are at the Library of Congress. So I think it's just desserts of some kind. But I will say that I spent a lot of time at the Library of Congress, just an unequaled resource. And it's both for the amount of material in the manuscripts section, all the books and newspapers, and really the terrific people that work there. Many of them are here today in the orange T-shirts, so thank you very much to the Library of Congress. 200 years ago this spring, a Royal Navy squadron showed up in the Chesapeake Bay and unleashed a chain of events that would culminate in the burning of Washington, the battle for Baltimore, and the events that would spur the creation of the Star-Spangled Banner, our national anthem. And you know, most of the events of this story are familiar to us just as little bits and pieces. We don't quite know how they fit together. You know, we have images of Dolly Madison saving the portrait of George Washington, and you know, somehow Francis Scott Key is almost as if he's beamed down from outer space, shows up in Baltimore Harbor to witness the bombardment and writes a song about it. And Andrew Jackson whips the British down in New Orleans. And we know these as sort of almost separate little stories. We don't really know how they connect, or we've kind of forgotten a lot of that story. And growing up in this area, as I did in Alexandria, we're really immersed in history. Just fantastic places to visit. But a lot of it in Alexandria, for example, is Civil War history. All around this region, we get our share of it, and I'm as fascinated by the Civil War as anyone else. But it always struck me as kind of odd that we knew so little about this event that took place just 50 years before the Civil War, and despite the fact that right here, where we're standing right now, was really the center of action of some of the most dramatic parts of this story during the War of 1812. And you know, if we didn't have this behind me, we could see the Capitol back there, which of course was burned down. Didn't have the dome back then, but it was still a magnificent building that was being built for the ages. The White House at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue. A lot of what we know today about the war is misunderstood or just wrong. I wanted to set a little bit of an overview of the War of 1812, just to lay a little bit of context, not to go into too much detail, but one of the things that's very important to remember is that the United States declared war on Great Britain and not the other way around. We sometimes in the United States assume that, well, the British wanted to take back their colonies and that's why we were at war. And it was a lot more complicated than that, in that Great Britain was actually in the midst of this titanic struggle with Napoleon, this war that had lasted for the better part of 20 years with France. And from Great Britain's standpoint, they were in a life and death struggle, basically fighting for civilization in their mind. And they did not have any hesitation in trampling on American sovereignty in trying to win that war. You know, if we look forward 200 years to, say, the United States after 9/11, the British had kind of a you're either with us or against us mentality. And the United States felt that its own sovereignty was not being respected by Great Britain. Our ships were being stopped by British Royal Navy ships at sea. Anybody they suspected of being of British origin could be taken off and impressed into service in the Royal Navy. There were a lot of restrictions on American trade that were really infuriating to a lot of people in the United States. And in 1812, we had a new Congress that had been elected with a very, I wouldn't say radical, but there was a group of people that really felt firmly that we needed to put a stop to this, and they pushed for war with Great Britain. And President James Madison, who was a bit ambivalent on the subject, at the same time, you know, here's, of course, one of the great fathers of the Constitution. He had come to the conclusion that if the United States did not put a stop to British actions, we might as well be a vassal state of Great Britain again. So war is declared in 1812, and Great Britain was infuriated. They really saw it as a stab in the back. And that kind of sets the stage for our story. The war went pretty badly for both sides in different ways. For the United States, it was just a catastrophic start to the war. We launched several invasions of Canada. Another thing you don't hear about too often in the history books, but those failed miserably. The Canadians remember them well, by the way. It's a little dim in our memory. One of the great ironies, you know, when we talk about Francis Scott Key, who's a main character in my book, very interesting guy in my opinion. He, despite going on to write what's considered the most patriotic of all American songs, he was deeply opposed to this war, like a lot of Americans. The war split the country really right down the middle. Very partisan lines and very ugly recriminations being thrown around. And Francis Scott Key actually, when one of our invasions attempts to take over Quebec fails miserably, Key actually celebrates. And he writes a letter to his good friend John Randolph of Virginia, and he says, "This, I suppose, is treason, but as your Patrick Henry said, if it be treason, I glory in the name." And you think about that for a minute. I mean, if that was tweeted out or out on the cable shows, you know, Francis Scott Key would probably not have been thought of the same way we think of him today. But that was the atmosphere back then. The country was absolutely broke. The Treasury was, particularly a couple of years into the war, Congress had not agreed to any new taxes to pay for the war. So the Treasury was broke. The government was dysfunctional, radically vicious partisanship, as Francis Scott Key said. I don't know if any of this sounds familiar, but this is what the situation was. But, you know, for Great Britain, the war hadn't gone that well either from their standpoint. There'd been, particularly during the first year of the war, there'd been several American victories at sea, single ship victories by the USS Constitution, Old Ironsides, against British warships. And these have been humiliating for Great Britain. And Great Britain decided they needed to devote a little more attention, tied up as they were in France, with Napoleon.